business leaders who want to navigate the future of work with confidence. I'm Stuart from Connect Digital. We are a software development agency who build digital products that help companies move faster and do more with less using AI and automation. And we are very sort of curious innovators, and we want to share our learnings and learn from the experience of others, particularly with business leaders. Share that information with business leaders as they grapple with AI and how to scale it out in their businesses. So we launched FutureCo with a mission to really help business leaders understand how to combine human creativity with the precision of AI and help their teams focus on doing the kind of work they need to do without being bogged down in some of the mundane tasks that we all get stuck in. So we want to try and shift the conversation from tools, AI tools, and prompt engineering to processes and guardrails and the kind of ethical discussions that we need to have as business leaders as we prepare for the future. So my guest today is Alex Jenkins. He's the director of the WA Data Science Innovation Hub, which sounds very interesting. Look forward to hearing more about what Alex is up to in the Innovation Hub. I'm just going to read out an introduction to Alex, which sounds very impressive, and look forward to his insights. He's an artificial intelligence specialist and experienced technology leader with a history of leading consulting, product development, and data science teams. More than 15 years of experience working in the technology space, implementing and advocating for analytics, data science, and artificial intelligence solutions. So, Alex, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Stuart. Really happy to be here and have a chat about this very exciting topic.
Good. First question? What's the most fulfilling aspect of your role at it's WODSI, right? That's how we
That's
shorten
the
it.
acronym
WODSI.
we use, WODSI. So the most fulfilling part of my job. What a great question. Um, so if I had to sum up what we do in WODSI as succinctly as possible, we exist for the uptake and awareness of data science and artificial intelligence within Western Australia and the broader Australian community. And I think I get an absolute kick when we're able to match someone in industry or someone in academia that has a big problem, a serious problem, a juicy problem to solve, and we can identify that problem is approachable using machine learning, data science, and AI techniques, and that we can match that up like a jigsaw puzzle. And get a serious result out of that. So the most exciting aspect of artificial intelligence and data science for me is that these techniques are incredibly powerful. They are progressing at an astonishing rate. And if people are even aware of what's possible with this kind of technology, then it's just very exciting when we discover that there's a certain problem. It might be in the life sciences, it might be in education, it might be in any kind of vertical or industry area you might expect. And this fits a machine learning and data science approach. And generally, when this happens, the results are astronomical, and you can get a result that has significant impact on that particular industry in the real world. So that for me is the most exciting aspect of what we do.
Yeah, nice. So I imagine you get exposure to a lot of different use cases across a lot of different industries.
Yeah, so within the hub, we try to talk to as many industries as possible. If I had to pick the two sectors that I was most excited about artificial intelligence, I would say health and education, the life sciences and the education sector. However, there's also an enormous amount of potential in engineering. The mining and resources sector over here in Western Australia is also an enormous amount of potential, and how we can improve both the running of mining operations and exploration. And I think that what's also interesting is that when you solve a problem using data science or machine learning techniques in one domain, often it translates very well to problems in other domains. And this is true for all types of algorithms and mathematics. And I can even give you an example. We ran a hackathon last year, and one of the challenges was to try and help hospitals schedule outpatient visits. So every morning across Western Australia, hundreds of nurses go out and visit patients in their homes. And all of these visits have to be scheduled. And there's constraints on the scheduling. You must ensure that some patients are only seen by male nurses or only by female nurses. Some patients have to be seen in the morning, some in the afternoon. There's all of these different constraints that you add. And these hospitals in Western Australia someone was sitting down at the start of the day and using a map and a set of highlighters, and they were putting together a schedule like this manually every morning. Now, the mining industry, for those of you who have worked in mining, would understand that this kind of problem is very, very similar to the problem of short haul, moving dirt around a mine site and understanding you've got a daily target. You have to move X amount of ore from here to here, and it's a very similar problem. And within mining, they figured out ways to automate this more than a decade ago. So to be able to take those same algorithms and apply them into the healthcare space was for us very exciting, even as a prototype to show that it could be done. So there's a lot of translation. We call it translation of research between different industry sectors with data science and artificial intelligence.
Translation in the sense that you're using a similar approach to a problem in a different area?
Yeah. So often the mathematics and the computer science that underpins solving a particular problem is very relevant in another field. One example that I can talk to in some detail, these neural nets, one company, Google, DeepMind, it's called now. Back when they did this problem, it was just called DeepMind. They created an artificial intelligence which could play chess. And then they expanded that to a much more complex game, Go, which is a very ancient game. And no other computer program had managed to master this game. But their artificial intelligence called AlphaGo was able to solve this. And they were able to expand the same technology, use the same underlying architecture to create a generic game playing artificial intelligence. And then this kind of generic artificial intelligence is also that plays any kind of game that you can imagine and learns to master the game, is also very relevant, for instance, in engineering or running a processing plant. Let's say that you have a control system for a processing plant. You have to ensure that the processing plant is operating at its optimal state at all times. To the artificial intelligence, this looks a bit like a game. So you can see how something that seems a bit trivial in terms of creating a AI that solves a board game can be very valuable in the real world.
And a neural net being a representation of how humans think, right? It's like the decision-making tree or process that we go through to solve a problem or reach a conclusion is essentially being replicated or mimicked in those.
So I'll give a bit of an overview of where neural networks fit into this. And so I've used a bit of jargon here in terms of what we talk about. But when people say machine learning or artificial intelligence, often these terms are interchangeable. So machine learning is the set of software techniques that enable artificial intelligence. And the best analogy that I can give, I think, is to compare AI to traditional software. And so traditional software is it's like baking a cake. You have a recipe and a set of ingredients, and it's laid out in exacting detail. You have 1 cup of flour, 1 cup of sugar. You combine them together. It is a very fixed set of steps. And if you follow the steps exactly, you should get the desired outcome. So that's how traditional software is built. And programmers will sit there and define the instructions to bake the cake, whatever it might be. And that's how traditional software works. Now, if you compare that to a neural network, and so a neural network is the type of software that underpins machine learning and artificial intelligence, that works very differently. that works much more like how humans learn. And so a machine learning or a neural network approach to the same problem of baking a cake would be for the AI to read 100 different recipes about baking a cake. And then, much like a human, if a human did that, they would start to gain an understanding of what is the sort of essence of baking a cake. And obviously, there's some ratios between the amount of flour and water and eggs and so forth, and sugar that actually define, okay, this is what's really needed to make a cake. And so those rules start to be extracted using the neural network. And so the neural network's able to learn these representations in a much more flexible way compared to traditional software. And it enables them to deal with very noisy and imprecise data, much in the same way that humans can deal with noisy and imprecise data, whereas a traditional algorithm will just fall down if it doesn't get the values that it expects.
Helps us
So that's
read
the kind
between
of
the lines.
so that's the kind of contrast between it. And AI is much more like a human brain in how it learns. It learns by understanding other sources. You know, something like ChatGPT has read just about every book and every page on the internet, just about. And from that, it's learnt some kind of internal representation about the world. So it's a very different approach to creating software. It requires a huge amount of computing power to do effectively. And that's really only been capable and enabled in the last decade, that we would have the serious computing power to do useful things with these neural networks.
On a very different level, I know you spent some time with some kids at schools recently as part of their coding club. Love to hear some more about that, but not specifically, how do they think about AI, and do they have a appreciation for what it can do, or is it not in their thinking yet? Like, what was the experience when you got involved with the coding club?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do inside of WODSI is we try to ensure that we've got a fantastic supply of young talent within the state and the country that will allow Australia and Western Australia to have a very strong artificial intelligence ecosystem, you know, a kind of ecosystem that can compete on the world stage. And so we need to really nurture our young talent. And one area in particular where we see some incredible individuals is the neurodiverse community. And so these are students who might be on the spectrum. They might be have autism. They might have Asperger's, or sit somewhere on this spectrum. And Professor Telly Tan at Curtin University does incredible work. He has something called the Autism Academy for Software Quality Assurance, which creates pathways for these students for jobs into the technical community. Now, another thing that Professor Tan supports is the Coder Dojo clubs. And these clubs are programming clubs where kids can come together on the weekend and just do cool stuff. And so it was fantastic to sit down with these kids and show them some of the things that are possible with AI. Some of them are incredibly bright, incredibly advanced, you know, thinking in very different ways and very creative ways. And you know, often you find a lot of incredible talent in these students. They end up working in cybersecurity, all kinds of places. So there was an incredible amount of different levels of capability when I went to see these kids, but I was blown away. Some of them were making games, some of them were editing video footage and doing image editing. One guy was creating a Minecraft plugin, which I thought was pretty cool. He was 17 years old. I saw some 14-year-olds who were creating a game, and it was really very very special, and I was very proud that WODSI could go and assist, go and work with these groups. So we're going to be providing more support to these groups in the future. So stay tuned for an announcement on that side of things.
Yeah, nice. Good to hear. When it comes to business, there's so much hype still. We're kind of almost 18 months into the kind of chat GPT hype train, and there's still a lot of hype around what it can do. But like, where are you seeing actual impact in terms of business impact with different industries and real world use cases that are making a difference? Can you give us a perspective of that, so we understand, our listeners can understand where, when it's being used correctly and with the right guardrails, it's actually making a difference to the workforce and helping people do their jobs more effectively?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's one thing to be very excited about AI, and everyone should be excited about AI. It will change a lot of what we do at work. And the question is where to start. And so we've been working with one organization in particular to help define a bit of a framework for evaluating opportunities for the use of AI. You might find a particular business process within your organization that you think is suitable for artificial intelligence. And then the question for us is, right, well, how do we actually provide some process that enables them to check it, to see whether it's a good fit for AI, whether there's going to be any ethical issues, whether there's going to be issues with bias or accuracy when an AI hallucinates. And that's been quite an interesting process. But I'm seeing use cases, for instance, it's very interesting talking to the medical community. A lot of GPs are using transcription software, which allows them to create patient notes very quickly or automatically after a session with a patient. So the patient will come in, and this one doctor, it was very interesting the way she talked about it. She said that as a result of using this software, so it's just like a dictaphone, you press record, and she would actually explain as she's going what she's doing. So, if she's measuring if she's listening to someone's lungs or their heartbeat, she would actually be talking about that and talking that through to herself, so that the recording would reflect that. But also the side effect is that the patient gets a better understanding of what's happening. Now, then at the end of the appointment, the ability to summarize that whole interaction automatically using artificial intelligence can save doctors a huge amount of time. And I'd love to see this in multiple different industries. I've been speaking to other people about how this might also be of assistance in the financial counseling industry, any kind of industry where there's a lot of follow-up, and that, you might have a client session, and then there's, a whole lot of writing up or summarizing what's taking place. So that's a use case which is relevant across multiple industries and is possible pretty much today. It's very exciting. There's also a lot of work that's happening in marketing and copywriting. Obviously, ChatGPT is changing how these fields work. But to me, what's really exciting, and I presented at an agri-food conference recently, which was focused on the use of technology in the agri-food industry. Now, if you're a primary producer and you're exporting to multiple markets, the ability to make marketing material that is relevant for people who speak a variety of different languages is really important. Now, it used to be the case that this would be, very expensive. If you were to make a marketing video and replicate that into 12 different languages, that would be quite an undertaking. However, using deepfake technology, we can do that very, very quickly in a matter of minutes now. And in fact, if you're interested, I can show your audiences an example of what this might look like when we created a demo of this and how it might work in the telehealth industry. But you can imagine from this how this might be relevant for a primary producer or any kind of business that's selling to an international market. The ability to create marketing material relevant for multiple languages. So if you like, I can bring that up.
Let's have a look. Sounds intriguing.
Okay, so what you have here is just simply me making a recording of myself. And this is where we were looking to say, okay, how can we use AI in the telehealth arena? obviously in telehealth. It's very important, has been important during COVID. And we were thinking, well, how can it be made better for people in the regions? So here's an example of me just pretending to be a doctor for a few seconds. Good morning. My name is Dr. Alex. I'll be conducting our telehealth session this morning. Firstly, I'd like to confirm that you are in a private and comfortable setting, and we can discuss your healthcare information in a confidential manner. Okay, nothing special about that video. Now I want you to watch this next video. Buenos días, soy el doctor Alex. Haré nuestra sesión de telemedicina esta mañana. Antes que nada, confirmo que estás en un lugar privado y cómodo para hablar de tu información de salud de manera confidencial. Now that video is entirely fake. It is a product of the first video. And so this artificial intelligence model does a number of things. It reads in this initial video that we made. It listens to what I'm saying, understands what I'm saying, translates it into the required language. It takes the tone of my voice and reproduces the sound in the sound of my voice speaking another language. And then also it changes the way that my lips move to make sure that it syncs up with the audio. So we've even got one more there. 早上好，我是博士亚历克斯。我们将在今天上午进行远程医疗会话。首先，我想确认您
The multilingual Alex.
的环境中，我们可以以保密的方式讨论您的医疗。Very cool. So I don't speak a word of Mandarin, but I have been assured by native speakers that it is quite acceptable. And it's very exciting. It only took a few minutes to take that original clip. I used a service called Hey Gen Labs in this case to translate it into a multiple different languages. And this took a few minutes. I don't think it's going to be that long before this kind of level of translation can be done instantaneously. So if you can imagine holding business meetings internationally with partners who within Asia or something like that, and being able to both speak your native tongue, I think that'll be incredibly empowering. So this is a use case that is really starting now. The thing I'm really excited about is when businesses can deploy this technology in such a way that they can do it in parallel alongside existing processes without really worrying about risk. I wouldn't recommend that any business or organization take an AI process and replace it with AI in the first instance. When, just run it alongside, get an AI to run it alongside your existing business process and see what the results are so that you can sort of A/B test it versus your existing process.
Yeah, it's very interesting. The whole real-time aspect fascinates us. We're playing with some kind of guided expertise, concepts or proof of concept work around, say for example, you mentioned the financial space. If it's a guided sort of expert-led conversational AI that sits in the background of your meetings and helps you, ask the right questions and lifts the level of service that you provide clients, that's a great way to augment your process with AI. How far off do you think that the real-time AI like that and the capabilities around that are?
I think we're very close to that. I think the technology is actually available now. It's in the early stages, but all of the pieces are there. We don't need a big breakthrough to make that happen. It's just a matter of sort of bringing that together into a cohesive solution. A great example of that. So WODSI ran a hackathon with the Department of Fire and Emergency Services, who are building the next generation of their Emergency WA platform. So for those who don't know, Emergency WA is a centralized platform for the management of emergencies in WA, bushfires, natural disasters, all kinds of things. And DFES, the agency that runs this, is interested in how generative AI could be used into the future. Now, one of the challenges they have is operator training. You have an operator and they need to get training through real-world experience of talking with first responders on the ground. Obviously, that's a very high-pressure situation. Now, during this hackathon, we looked at, right, how can we use generative AI to improve things within emergency WA and the emergency services in general. And one team came up with this fantastic solution, which would listen into a conversation between an operator and a first responder on the ground at a bushfire. And it would listen to what they're asking and kind of tick off the things that they're asking. You know, have you asked about the number of people who are in danger? Have you asked about the exact location of the emergency? Have you asked about access roads or access to the point of the emergency? And then this AI would be able to actually come up on the screen and say, hey, make sure that you ask about this or ask about that. And that could be an incredibly useful tool in how we train operators, particularly in high pressure jobs, which there's not a lot of room for error in this kind of these kind of roles. We thought that was really exciting. So the AI kind of listens in the background and only steps in to provide that nudge of support if the operator has perhaps left something out of their questioning. So yeah, I see that the technology is here today. It's just a matter of bringing it together into a cohesive solution.
Yeah, nice. And then when you combine that with some of the sort of big data that it's sort of at the back end of big organisations and large companies, I imagine there's a wealth of opportunity around tapping into that sort of latent intelligence or latent data store to build intelligence on top of that, to then service that to employees for better awareness of previous cases or historical incidents that can help them with their current situation. So I imagine AI plus big data would be a real area of focus for the larger organisations around. Is that
so that's going to be
your experience?
It's going to be a real competitive differentiator, I think, for large organizations and any organization that stores a lot of data. So we have AIs like ChatGPT and Bing and Bard, or Gemini as it's now known. And they know sort of everything about the world from the public internet. But what they don't know about is all of this data that's stored within your organization, all this intellectual property. And I think some of the more interesting applications for AI will come out of this niche use case where we use the AI and then have it associated with the private and internal knowledge of corporations to be able to improve decision-making and analytics. And that's going to be a very powerful thing. I think within the healthcare sector in particular, there's an enormous amount of data that's locked up. Many industries have an enormous amount of data locked away because it must be kept private and contains personally identifiable information. Now, there's also a fantastic technique that we explored at a WODSI initiative, and it's called synthetic data. And this is the ability to take an existing data set, and we did this with the Department of Health and Microsoft in Western Australia. Inside the Department of Health, some of the data scientists worked on using AI models to create what we call synthetic data sets. Now, a synthetic data set is like a forgery of a real data set. So let's say you have a data set inside a hospital of emergency department admissions. Now, that data contains very private and personal information. It's going to contain names, it's going to contain addresses. And so traditionally what you would do within the research community, if you want access to that data, you make a request, and then the data, someone looks at the data and says, okay, there's obviously private information here, and they start masking it out. And the problem with that process is that the more you mask the data, the less useful it becomes, because you're at risk of masking some of the information which might help your research. And so the challenge is, well, how do we actually unleash the power of that data that's locked up without impinging on people's privacy? And a synthetic data set is a way to make a forgery of a real data set. And so we would have a group of emergency admissions, let's say 1,000 emergency admissions. And statistically, if we kind of zoom out and look at that data set, we can say, right, well, the average wait time is 4.3 hours, or the average time for someone to get a bed is 2 hours, whatever it might be. Now, we can do this by creating fake emergency admissions and creating a data set that looks statistically like the real data set, but doesn't contain anyone's personal information. It's all made up of little fake individuals. And this is a really exciting process, and it's very similar to how some of these deep fake videos work, or that voice cloning demo that I just showed you. That wasn't my voice, but it sounded like my voice. And we can create data that looks like the real data, but isn't the real data. This is very exciting to me because it will allow large organizations to really tap into data sets in a way that they never have done before. I think we'll see some extraordinarily exciting applications of AI through that.
Yeah, nice. That's useful to know. So it's effectively duplicating a data set without the implications of giving away sensitive or private information, and allowing people to query that.
Yeah, so you get to have your cake and eat it too. It used to be the case that you could release some of this data for research, but you had to heavily redact it, and you had to mask people's names and addresses and so forth. And that often would, let's say if you mask out the address and the postcode, then any kind of, let's say if you're looking at emergency admissions across the state, but you were only able to look at it at a postcode level, it gives you a different, sort of a somewhat compromised understanding of the data, because you are taking away some of that detail. So I think that it's a really powerful technique. The best analogy I can give for how this works is like forging banknotes. So there's two parts of this AI, this neural network. There's one called a generator, and there's another one called a discriminator. And then the generator will generate a data set, a fake data set, and it will pass it on to the discriminator. And the discriminator is like the police. So if let's say I create a forgery of a $20 note, and then the police get their hands on it, they look at it and they say, right, okay, we can see that the text here is a bit blurry. So now we know that this is no good. And so what happens is that goes back, that information is then taken back to the money forgers, who will look at it and say, okay, we've got to improve our process there. And so they make the text a bit better. And so then they produce a new generation of fake banknotes. And that goes to the police, and the police look at it and say, well, actually the hologram on the banknote's not that great. And so then it goes back to the forgery people, and they improve the hologram. And so there's this constant sort of battle, right, between the forgers and the police. But one result is that the quality of the fake banknote gets higher and higher and higher.
Ticks up.
And it's very hard to distinguish between that and the real thing. And that's what's happening within this artificial intelligence, is it's constantly refining the data set until it looks, if you look at it under the microscope, it really looks like the real data, even though it isn't. So it's a very exciting technique. Yeah,
nice. When you talk to business leaders about how they can move to that kind of approach, there's obviously a very deliberate strategic approach that they need to take, and companies need to kind of almost walk before they can run, and step through the learning and experimentation phase, and start to kind of grow their or be more mature in their approach and their use of AI. But how do you think leaders need to start on that process, or start that journey, and start to think about AI as a strategic imperative, and then align that with their business strategy or their business drivers? Like, have you got any thoughts on how they can tackle that, and if they haven't started, to get underway and at least progress that?
Yeah, so I think that the best thing to do at this point, because the technology is changing so fast, if you spend, say, 6 months undertaking some kind of very in-depth strategic overview in this space, by the time you have completed that process, the technology will have changed significantly, and the capability of the technology will have changed. So I support an agile approach, and I support an approach where the strategic focus is on incremental deployment of test cases and small use cases, which will familiarize your organization with the technology. and also allow you to develop strategies to mitigate any risks or concerns that might become apparent. Now, in the end, an AI project is no different really from a software project. And organizations these days, most organizations have well-developed methodologies and strategies for implementing software within their organization. The difference with AI is that you are dealing with an entirely different type of capability. It's more like a human, and the kind of mistakes that an AI make are more human in their manner. We don't worry about a spreadsheet calculating the wrong result for an addition. That would not be part of a risk assessment for a software project, but it's possible that an AI will sometimes make an error. So we need, when we design a process that uses AI, we need to ensure that that's captured. So my pragmatic advice at this point is to identify opportunities, focus on small use cases, implement them as quickly as feasible. Be really wary about data security and data privacy. So you need an understanding of how your internal data is going to be used by the third-party service. Certainly, if there are APIs from OpenAI and Microsoft that allow you to ensure, and Google as well, multiple companies that allow you to use this technology whilst ensuring that the information is kept private. And again, that's not that different from traditional cloud data management strategies that organizations have had for a while. So start small, start pragmatic, have a fast feedback loop, and I would probably argue to keep it internal until you get a bit more comfortable with the technology and before you make something that's customer facing. We did have an instance in Canada, I think, where an airline was using an artificial intelligence for a chatbot support. Someone managed to convince the chatbot that certain flights were priced at $1 each, and the airline was forced to provide those flights to honour what the AI had said, even though it had made it up. So there are risks here, and it's just about mitigating the risks. I think that the risks largely are overblown in terms of implementation for business, and that with the proper controls, that it's very exciting to be able to use this technology.
Yeah, I think the mindset's important too. Just what the business needs to have a mindset that there's going to be potential roadblocks. You may go down a path for 2 months and have to back out and go at it again, a different approach, and have that flexible sort of mindset, which I guess is part of the agile mindset.
It is very agile. One advantage of this kind of software development as well is that it can be done very quickly. If you are able to integrate a few data sources into an artificial intelligence, actually having the artificial intelligence act in a certain way can be as simple as telling it what you want it to do, and it will start processing the data in that method. And that's a very powerful way to start developing software, because it allows you to iterate much faster than traditional software development. I think that what we're doing inside WODSI, inside our organization as well, is we are creating a framework. We are going to keep it simple, lean, agile. It's a very short piece that allows you to evaluate whether an opportunity is a good use case for AI. So it'll ask questions like, what is the sensitivity of the data that you would be processing? Is the business process that you're looking to complement with artificial intelligence exposed to customers or end users? What's the tolerance for an error in this process, in this business process? So we really hope that we can create something that allows people within an organization to say, hey, this is a business process where let's say we're collecting paper forms, and then we're manually transcribing that into a computer. Now, that's a task that is very well suited to be automated with an AI. Just scanning it and then using an AI to read the text on the form and process it into a database, for instance. That's a great use case. We want something that will allow people within an organization to identify those kind of opportunities and say, hey, I've done this analysis. This looks like a good candidate for the use of AI. So we'll be looking to release that framework as a public document, and also providing those kind of services into the community and businesses at large.
Great, good to hear. There's some really good content coming out from a government level, and and from industry bodies like CSIRO, where they're producing really well sort of structured, easy to understand frameworks for businesses to pick up and run with. So there seems
Yeah.
to be this kind of growing resource at that level from, that's helping sort of government align with business and even small business, just to help that whole I guess improve the momentum, or speed up the momentum of adoption. So it'd be
So
nice to kind of get your advice on how businesses can sort of tap into that momentum and make use of those frameworks as you suggest.
yeah, so the National AI Centre have produced a lot of material in that space, um, which is great. And often even the New South Wales government, and I know that the WA government as well, have released these kind of guidelines on the use of AI in certain areas. I think the gap that we're trying to fill is very much focused on, okay, what's if I'm going to implement this, if I understand the ethical, there's, no ethical issues, or minimal ethical issues that can be managed via risk controls. Um, what's the kind of implementation approach that we should take? We really wanted to make it as pragmatic as possible, so that we could produce. I think we're going to produce an output from this framework that can be really forwarded to an executive team, and it's a very simple and clear structured proposal to say, hey, this is the project I want to undertake. This is the return on investment. This is the payback period, and keep it as something that can be evaluated very quickly, so that we can actually get more of these projects happening. We've
Nice.
we identified that is something that we think will be valuable to the market.
That's good. This is all sort of getting ahead of the wave that's coming, I think, with the future talent that's starting to hit, knock on our doors, where you've got this younger generation that are really AI savvy. They use it regularly, um, and increasingly for their job, even if their employers don't necessarily know about it. But keen to get your thoughts on how organisations can start to think about those future teams. What does a future team look like, and how do we start to think about or prepare for those AI savvy staff members that start coming through our organisations? Like, what do we, how do we foster AI fluency and continuous improvement when it comes to technology like AI?
Yeah, so I think that the organization of the near future, you will use AI like a team member. So sort of everyone becomes a manager in that sense,
Mm.
and that you might provide tasks to an artificial intelligence, and that artificial intelligence can go away. Maybe it's to research a particular topic. Maybe it's to summarize a set of papers, or write a set of papers based on documentation that you provide. And so then the skill set there becomes being able to take a goal and break it down into subtasks, and then give those subtasks to an artificial intelligence that it can do. So there's an aspect of leadership there. I'd argue that we need to make everyone a manager in a certain way, because they would be managing a team of AI agents, to allow them to become more productive. And so what's interesting about AI is to get the best results, you should articulate what you want. You should give context about the task you're trying to achieve. You should give prior examples, and you should explain how the task fits into the wider narrative of the business. How does this relate to the high level business goals of your
Yep.
organization? Now, those are all exactly the same kind of things that you should be telling an employee if you're
Mm.
asking them to do something and you want the best results. So the skills that are going to be important remain communication. I think also as well, critical analysis is very important. We're going to very soon live in a world where well, I'd argue we live in it already, where we're bombarded by information, and the ability to discern what's real, versus fake news, versus, but not only what's real, but what's important, and helping to to analyze information in a way that allows you to act on it.
Mm.
So I think the critical analysis kind of skill sets that have always been important are really important now, as we enter a world where we live in this, just saturated information being bombarded at us from every direction.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can see a world, I can see an organization where everyone has AI agents that work for them, and your job is to basically ensure that AI agents are given a task and
Yep. Briefed
able to
incorrectly.
able to perform that task in a way, or able to understand that task in a way that they can perform it. So that becomes about communication, it becomes about management, and it becomes about clear understanding of how something relates to the business. It's going to be interesting that, like, one use case that I think is quite amusing with AI. Within any large organization, you get a lot of bureaucratic kind of fluff, a lot of noise. And it's entirely possible, for instance, that I could say to my AI assistant, right, I want you to compose an email to Stuart that gives him a very detailed overview of the projects I'm working on. And so I get the AI to write that. I don't even read it. I send it to you. You get the email. You're like, I don't have time to read this. You ask your AI assistant to summarize it down to a few dot points for you.
Yep.
And so this exchange has taken place that's, largely perhaps pointless. So,
Mm.
and we would have been better off just sending a few dot points to each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I hope that we can avoid that. And I think it will get a bit silly if we try to have artificial intelligence replicate a lot of the processes that humans do inside an organization. So my hope is that we can use AI to make organizations leaner, and also improve the propagation of information. Again, another thing I notice about large organizations, having worked in many, is that it's very difficult to maintain a cohesive messaging and cohesive communication past a certain size of a team. And that's true throughout society, and it's true through civilization as well. I think there's some significant results in psychology which can show that, past a certain size, teams are unable to act completely cohesively simply because there's too many people to maintain communication with, and the overhead cost of maintaining that communication is high. And you see that inside organizations, right? And we try and manage that by breaking teams into hierarchies. But often we find that the left hand of an organization doesn't know what the right hand is doing. I worked for an organization once that would go for large tenders. And because the organization was so large, sometimes a team over here would go for a tender and my team would go for a tender. And neither of us would even realize that both teams from the same organization were going for their tender, and we would end up
Competing
competing
against each other. Yeah.
against ourselves, essentially.
Mm.
That can't be in the best interest of the organization. But it was just, it's not possible when you're talking, about an organization with tens of thousands of people to have effective communication. And I think that AI will really help with that. That's my hope. I think there's some really interesting research here in terms of how human communication limits the effectiveness of an organization as it grows. It's very hard to maintain a cohesive organization as it scales to be large.
Yeah. 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 I think that's where conversational AI can be of massive benefit. Just if it's almost like in my head, it's like this kind of Google search bar for your organization. It's like, who's working on this? Does
Yeah,
anyone know anything about this? And, you know, back to our conversation about big data, if AI can sit over the top of that kind of company-wide intelligence and help break silos down, that's a really useful way to use it. It's just it gives you insights based on what's going on around the organization.
Yeah, and that is such a fantastic use case. So there's a name for this. We call it retrieval augmented generation. And the reason for that is that we use an AI and we retrieve information from inside a corporate, maybe it's a SharePoint or a set of file and folders. And we use the content that's retrieved to answer the question. And so that will be fantastic. It will answer questions like who else inside an organization is working on the same problem that I'm working on. And so often it's the case that you would see within a large organization someone working on something similar that's very helpful for you, and you wouldn't even know that they're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think,
I can see that being, and already people are starting to build tools like that. And also, I think the Microsoft's Copilot tools will enable functionality like that in the near future. It's a very, very useful use case for AI.
yeah. And I think just it makes AI more approachable in some ways. There's this sort of mixture of excitement and fear about what AI is doing or can do, and use cases like that help people get quick, value very quickly from it. I think will help the understanding and the fluency around AI and just what it's capable of. And even though it's sort of a layer of abstraction above the technical details of that, of the systems behind it, it's just a very simple way to get AI to be helpful. And I
Yeah.
think the sort of transparency of that is going to become more important as people, want to know what AI is doing behind the scenes, and start
Yeah.
to really kind of, I guess, not confuse the conversations that are happening, but make just be more transparent with them.
Yeah, that use case of sort of AI unlocking, corporate knowledge or knowledge inside an organization is going to be really useful. It's definitely number
Mm.
one on the use case. This is
Mm.
sort of the number one question I get as well. It's like, well, how can I use something like ChatGPT but with my own data?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the companies like OpenAI realize this, and Microsoft and Google and everyone. So yeah, rest assured that that's a use case that I think will be well supported.
Yeah.
It already is now, and will be into the
Yeah.
future.
We've got a couple of minutes before we wrap up. Just want to get your sort of crystal ball out and get your sort of prediction on the unpredictable. I guess, like, where do you see AI evolving in the next few years? Like, what kind of world are we going to have? Do you think you've already sort of captured that in what you've said, or are we going to be moving much faster than what you've talked about?
The technology is moving really fast. I would never presume to have a good idea about what's going to happen in the future with this. I think the best way to think about this is trying to imagine what it was like at the start of the internet. And I remember that. I was a part of that as a teenager, and that was a fantastic time. But there was no way I could have imagined the type of use cases that the internet enables now. Back in the late 90s, it was just out of my imagination. And I think the same is true of mobile phones. And you think about what happened with smartphones, it was incredible. Within sort of 12 to 18 months, everyone all of a sudden had the internet in their pocket and had apps and had GPS. And it's a significant shift in the way that we live. I think artificial intelligence, it'll be the same. We'll look back at it and go, wow, that was a seismic change. So there's a distinction here as well between the current generation of AI and what I would call artificial general intelligence, which is AI that is on par with humans' ability to learn and create new things. Current generation of AI, even as it improves, is not really capable of doing certain tasks in the same way that humans can. So I look at it as there's this sort of a Venn diagram of intersection of AI capabilities and human capabilities, and we're very much in the realm where AI is intersecting many of these areas. But there's still quite a few things that are that an AI can't do. An AI, for instance, is not going to come up with the theory of relativity. I don't think in its current form, in its current architecture. I think that something like highly creative reasoning and a highly creative original reasoning is outside of the bounds of what current generation could do. So obviously, if we do breach that and we start to see AI that is capable of that level of reasoning, then that will accelerate scientific process, scientific discovery, and that will be, who knows what that will look like. I also think it's going to be really exciting what creativity looks like. So one thing about human communication and creativity is that I will send a message to you. I have an idea in my mind, and I compress that down to a set of sounds. I send those sounds to you, and I hope, fingers crossed, that it will be reinflated in your mind in some semblance of what I imagined it would be.
Somehow.
Yes, replicated. And then if I've done that correctly, I've transmitted a thought, an idea to you. And that is, it's actually incredible how often that fails. I mean, humans miscommunicate all the time. So miscommunication is annoying. Miscommunication is troublesome. It causes, all kinds of conflicts. But it's also a manner in which new ideas are created. If I communicate something to you and you sort of look at it from your context and experience, then it's entirely possible that a new thought, a new idea will come into your head because you're using that idea against your understanding of the world. And so I am excited to see how this idea of communication and the sort of evolution of ideas and memetics, this idea of how ideas evolve and throughout the world will apply to artificial intelligence. If I have one AI over here and another AI over here, it's not going to be very exciting if they're the same AI and they transmit, a message to the other AI and it's just understood perfectly and it's, there's no room for it to be misunderstood. If we have different AIs, AI here and AI here, the message from this AI could be interpreted slightly differently. And that leaves room for creativity. It leaves room for the creation of new ideas. So I'm very excited to see how AIs communicate with each other. I think that will be a very exciting space. And whether we in fact want them to communicate perfectly, because it seems to me that the evolution of idea is via dialogue and misunderstanding and disagreement, much in the same way that genetics and genes are propagated through mutations, through error. So that to me is something that's very exciting about AI, which I don't think is really discussed a lot. And I hope that we have an ecosystem which supports multiple artificial intelligence. I think it'd be terrible if we just have a single monolithic corporate AI, which is very embedded in our lives.
Yeah, I think we'll look back at this era of kind of emerging AI and just call it vanilla AI. Actually, I think it's kind of, it's almost like, you can see it, you can spot an AI generated email a mile away, or a brief, or a request for a proposal. Like, you just know that's it. So moving past that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think we will start to. Well, we're already moving past that now, but it will be exciting for me to see how this world of AI agents develops when we give AI some autonomy to act in the world and communicate with each other. Some people are very scared of that, but I think that it's entirely possible to do in a way which is quite safe with minimal risk. So.
Awesome. Well, appreciate your insights, Alex. That's been very interesting to get your kind of pragmatic view of AI, and as you make your way around various organizations and educational institutions and so on, to sort of pick up those use cases that you've told us about. So appreciate your insights, appreciate your advice. We'll publish this on future.knkt.com.au. You can subscribe for more updates there. And look forward to chatting sometime in the near future.
Awesome, Stuart. Thanks very much. It was good fun.
Appreciate your time. Cheers.
See ya.